On May 25, 2020, an arrest in Minneapolis turned deadly and set off a firestorm of protests that would echo around the world. The incident was caught on camera, and calls for justice against the officers involved were universal. Even right-wing commentators like Ben Shapiro, who didn't want to frame the incident as racial in nature, were unified in condemnation of the way George Floyd had been treated.
What is another video of an awful incident involving the police? And I think that, once more, it is important to recognize that everyone should be on the same side of this. Right? Really, everyone should be on the same side of this. What we have seen here, and yet we are not. What we have seen here is a police officer kneeling on the neck of a black man for 4 straight minutes while he's being told by people, including the guy who is underneath his knee, that he cannot breathe. At the very least, the officer should go to jail for assault, you would assume, because this is not within the purview of employment. You don't get just it's police brutality, obviously.
We are approaching the 5th anniversary of this tragic event, and in a heavily divided nation politically, it seems some sentiments have changed.
There is one person that President Trump should pardon from federal charges forthwith. It would be incredibly controversial, but I think that it's absolutely necessary. That person is Derek Chauvin. President Trump should, in fact, pardon Derek Chauvin. He should. He should pardon him his federal charges. If we are talking about reversing the evils of the last several years in American life, obviously COVID and its handling was a massive evil. Destroyed the economy, set us on a path to fiscal insanity, destroyed children, led to massive health-related cover-ups, just horrifying all the way around. And President Trump has taken on a lot of those things. But when it came to BLM, the inciting event for the BLM riots that caused $2 billion in property damage in the United States and set America's race relations on their worst footing in my lifetime, was in fact the railroading of Derek Chauvin in the death of George Floyd.
Shapiro is not alone. All across social media, it seems that legions are now calling for President Trump to pardon and release Derek Chauvin. However, Chauvin was not only convicted on federal charges, but state charges as well. These charges cannot be pardoned by the president, and local officials in Minnesota are holding firm in their commitment to keep the former law enforcement officer behind bars. He still owes Minnesota 22.5 years, said Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, and he's going to do it either in Minnesota or somewhere, but he's not getting out. A year ago, Ellison sat down with Al McFarland to reflect on the case during the Conversation podcast for Black Press USA.
And I'll just note for folks, there is something about when a person is killed, murdered at the hands of somebody who was an agent of the state. Because we trust, the state is us. The state is all of us. The state is our government. And when a private individual commits a crime or kills somebody, the state is going to hold them accountable. But what about when an agent of the state does it? It makes it different. And it means that the state, in order to maintain just credibility, maintain any sense of trust, must move to hold that particular offender accountable, or everything is chaos, where people don't trust it, don't cooperate. And so I've had people say, well, it's tragic that George Floyd died, but, it's a murder. Murders happen every day. No, this is unique because this happened at the hands of the people we entrust, the Guardian. And by doing so, he besmirched the reputation of every great officer who tries to do the right thing every day. By still doing, and therefore we had to move to hold him accountable. As I sit here, Al, I got to tell you, I'm not sure that if a courageous 17-year-old girl didn't have the presence of mind to whip out her phone and take pictures, we may not be sitting here today. We may be, because I tell you, 2 blocks south of here, man, on 36 in Chicago, in 1998, you may remember me and Larry Reed and Jeff Hassan civilly sued Minneapolis Police Department for shooting Lawrence Miles in the back, who was 15 years old at the time. Now, Miles did not die, but he's 45 today and has permanent injuries, which he's never been compensated for, because I'm not proud to admit we lost. So people have said to me, oh, Keith, thanks for what you did on that case. I'm like, I'm thinking about, we've lost cases we should have won because of the way jurors saw our client. And so let me tell you, man, this came from a lot of hard knocks. This came from disappointment and grief. I will say that when the governor called me, I did have a sense of what needed to be done. And because of losses that it came before. So I view it as a tremendous privilege. I think all of the credit really goes to the courage of George Floyd to call out for his own life, to the bystanders who called out for his life, who came back a year later, and all of them testified as to what they saw, despite the fact that these are not public people. These are private individuals who want to mind their own business. His family, I remember flying down to Houston, meeting his loved ones here, who had they would be well within their rights to simply grieve their loved one. But they all have stood up and given more and brought attention to it and said, hey, look, we don't want this to happen to anybody else's brother, cousin, uncle, So that you asked what's on my mind, all that's on my mind.
Aside from the legal and political side to this story, a new Pew Research Center study reveals a sobering assessment from Americans. The heightened focus on race and racial inequality following the 2020 protests has largely failed to improve the lives of Black people. This was highlighted in a story by Stacy M. Brown for Black Press USA that recently ran in the North Dallas Gazette, link in the description. Brown notes that in the immediate aftermath of Floyd's death at the hands of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, who was convicted of murder and manslaughter and sentenced to over 20 years in prison, public attention surged. Millions joined protests across the country. Support for the Black Lives Matter movement peaked, with 67% of Americans backing the cause, and 52% believed at the time that the national reckoning would result in meaningful change for Black Americans. Fast forward to today, and just 27% of Americans believe those promises of change were fulfilled. According to a February 2025 Pew survey of more than 5,000 adults, the initial wave of optimism has largely receded. A striking 72% now say that the heightened attention to racial inequality has done little to improve life for Black Americans. The shift in sentiment is visible even within the Democratic Party. Back in 2020, 70% of Democrats believed the national reckoning on race would lead to meaningful progress. Today, that confidence has dwindled to just 34%. The decline in support for the Black Lives Matter movement paints a similar picture. Once riding a wave of momentum in 2020, public backing has fallen to 52%. The movement still garners strong support from Black Americans, with 76% expressing a favorable view, as well as 84% of Democrats and 61% of adults under 30. In contrast, only 45% of white adults and 22% of Republicans say they support the cause. The Pew Research Center's extensive study paints a sobering picture. What once felt like a historic moment of racial reckoning now strikes many Americans as a moment that slipped away, full of promise, but short on lasting change.